parents are clean. By that I mean to say that, although we lived on a farm, my parents dressed very carefully. They had a strict and precise aesthetic code. They were like the aristocrats of Japan's Heian period, described by the Reverend James Murdoch, writing in Scotland at the end of the 19th century, as a never-purificating brood of greedy, needy, frivolous dilettanti, as often as not foully licentious, utterly effeminate, incapable of any worthy achievement, but with all the polished exponents of high breeding and correct form. In fact, my parents' resemblance to this striking, feathered, inbred brood makes the tragedy of my father's subsequent affair with the barnyard fowl and the consequent downfall of the family dynasty all the less surprising, and inevitability, perhaps. For, like in Japan, our farmhouse in the forests of Scotland was an intellectual garden, full of pampered minions and bepowdered poetasters. Nevertheless, I am flooded with nostalgia, that most sensuously effulgent and effeminate of emotions, when I remember a typical scene on the farm. Dusk is falling, and the sky is seared with gashes of hot pink satin. Migrating geese are flying far overhead, for it is late summer. There is a cool breeze, scented with pine cones, drifting in from the dark, silent forest that surrounds our estate. On the raised wooden walkways leading from building to building, the petal paths, we call them ancient braziers, have been lit. My mother sweeps by, followed at a discreet distance by two attendants who bear her train. My mother lives in an elegant pavilion at the other end of the orchard. It is the custom for married people to live apart. This way they retain their dignity and independence. Joan spends much of her time writing in her pillar book, or receiving admirers who court her with compact, elegant poems. It takes her so long to get dressed, even with several attendants helping, that she often spends 6 or 7 hours preparing for a public appearance which would last only 20 minutes and consist of a few highly formalized ritual gestures. You can see why, in these circumstances, she libates for her suitors, and the flutter these candy silicons bring to her heart. My father, meanwhile, spends his time making highly detailed technical drawings with a mechanical pencil. The drawings depict utopian improvements he intends to make to the estate. We all know he will never implement these plans, and soon he admits it himself, turning his attention to his feathered friend instead. It is at this moment that he bursts into my mother's summer house at the end of the orchard, wearing a particularly gorgeous and expensive kimono, of which the dominant tones are muted marcy grays, and the motif a pattern of Pinus japonica, the Japanese pine, and declares this is the pikai pinfuki. It might seem like an impossibly vulgar gesture in such a refined environment, and yet this, too, could be an expression of refinement, an outburst on the part of a man for whom human sexual contact has become unbearably crude. For instance, nothing is more ugly than the naked human body. Women wear 5 or 6 layers of robes, and make love with them on. The sleeves are crucial. Each garment has a slightly different length and color of material, and the sleeves end, as a result, in exquisitely layered spectral and textural ranges. But, for a man as highly sensitive and refined as my father, it is likely that even the knowledge that his wife's robes could be removed, whether they ever were or not, would have been a torture enough, perhaps, to lead him to acts of understandable adultery with a creature whose clothes were physically attached to her, and who could only become naked when plucked as a preface to being cooked for lunch. In comparison to this miraculous bird, then, any human would naturally seem like a kind of pig. Yes, I can understand my father. You may think I am struggling unnecessarily hard to defend him. Wasn't he, after all, being technically bestial when he declared to a goose, no less, that his wife was the pig I had been fucking? Why claim, in retrospect, that he was in fact a man of exquisite sensibility, rarefied taste, and unusual refinement? Why should I, especially, not condemn him? I will tell you why. I must begin with the Hindu concept of karma.